This is assignment 4 of Unit 2, which is physiology. This is the adaptations of the body systems due to long-term training. So, in terms of looking at adaptations, you first need to sort of decide on the event that you're looking at. So, for example, if you're a footballer, obviously you're specifically tailoring your adaptations to football. If you're a marathon runner, you're going to specifically tailor those adaptations to running a marathon. So, um, and also you need to look at the demands of this sport. So usually it's the sort of duration and the intensity of it. So for football, you have a relatively high duration and varying levels of intensity due to the nature of each game being very different. Also, depending on the different play styles of each game. So, for example, Spain in the World Cup in 20 well, no yeah in the World Cup in 2010 in South Africa, they played a very slow possession based game where there wasn't a lot of long distance or short distance sprints. It was a lot of sort of jogging around the pitch, passing the ball and letting the ball do the work. Whereas um, someone someone who plays for a team like Liverpool at the moment under Jurgen Klopp, a lot of their game is based on very high intense pressing high up the pitch, so it's lots of sprints to try and cut out passes and make interceptions. Also, different positions on the pitch have varying demands. So, a midfielder would be naturally expected to be on the move for prolonged periods of the game due to the nature of their position. Whereas someone like Daniel Sturridge, who's a striker, they could have 40 minutes where they don't have to really put themselves about, and then they have 5 minutes where the ball's on the edge of the box constantly, the ball's in the box constantly, they're getting lots of chances, and that's when the game becomes intense for them. So that's going to be the main sport I'm going to be focusing on over the duration of the assignment. But to add like contrast to show the different demands and different intensities and durations of different sports, I've included these three other sports. So you've got a marathon runner. So running a marathon, it's very high duration, but relatively lower intensities. So you're going to be mainly working aerobically. This is a Olympic weightlifter. So the duration of their sport is just one lift. It's a couple of lifts over the whole sort of day, but it's usually only one lift, and then you have a long period of time where you're not lifting any weights. So theirs is a very high intensity because you're using every muscle and every ounce of strength you have in your body to try and lift that weight above your head. But the intensity is a lot lower. Whereas a sport such as boxing has very varied demands and very varied intensities and duration. So the duration is very dependent on how many rounds they do, so and how quickly they get the fight finished. So this is completely in their hands how intense they want the fight and how long they want the fight to go. Really, a lot of fighters will set up with a game plan to try get in there and finish it early, especially a heavyweight boxer like Anthony Joshua. Whereas someone who's in a lower weight category will usually make it a more technical fight, and a lot of the time it will go the distance. So you will need to be very aerobically fit and also anaerobically fit to compete in a sport such as boxing. So especially for football now, what is it? A lot of a lot of football teams work on their aerobic fitness because they are working aerobically for long periods of the game. Not a lot of, well, there is a lot of short sprints, but a large majority they are going to be jogging around. They are going to be very slowly moving to sort of catch their breath back and recover slightly from the sprint they've just done. So for football, what is it? It's used aerobic cardiovascular fitness is used predominantly during a game. So to improve this, lots of football players will do continuous training. So this will a lot of teams, especially during pre-season, will start with certain set times. So for example, a 30-minute run on a treadmill, and so they'll set a distance in the 30 minutes usually. So that they're having to work at a constant speed to reach a target. Um, and as they get through pre-season, so they will progress it further. So they'll go the same distance and 20 minutes, or the further distance and still half an hour. So it will change very, like there will be different changes in frequency, in the intensity and the time in which they do it. So also they will use fartlek training. A lot of football teams prefer their training to be a lot more tailored to the game. So fartlek is periods of running, sprinting, jogging, and walking over a set period of time. So a lot of teams will do it around a pitch. So it'd be sprint, say 10 meters, and a jog for 15, a walk for 5, and then a sprint for 20. So it's a lot more realistic to their games. A lot of players will also use anaerobic training methods. So this is things, you know, the reason why anaerobic training is important for football is it covers most of the important components of fitness which they need in football. So, for example, the two big ones which are very, very important during a game, especially if it's an intense game, is strength and speed. So to train these two specific components of fitness, a lot of footballers will do weight training or resistance training. This is mainly to build the strength, especially in, you know, it works both for upper body and lower body. Especially if they're building strength to hold players off the ball, they'll work a lot on their back muscles and their upper body muscles to give them, more of a presence on a pitch. When someone's going into them, it's going to give them a lot more strength to, push them off or hold their own. Whereas training the lower body, so the legs, this will also give you the strength to hold a player off or, win a 50-50 battle shoulder to shoulder, but also it will help improve speed. Um, you know, they'll do, especially if they're looking to build strength, because some players will look to, condition their body by using weight training. They'll do higher reps with lower weights, whereas someone who's just mainly building for strength, they'll do a very high weight and lower number of reps. And especially training footballer speed will also a lot of the time involve interval resistance training. So a lot of footballers will use things such as running parachutes or resistance bands, or even some teams they use like fitted vests with something to hold the players back on. So they'll have someone holding the player back, or they'll have weights attached to their back that they have to pull along with them. So, for example, if they were doing a resistance band session, so they had someone behind them holding a resistance band to, create a bit of a pull back so that they're having to push through something, they will usually do a sort of 30-meter sprint. And this will help them build up the strength and, and the power in their legs, which will ultimately lead to them being quicker players. So, mainly with aerobic training, you create cardiovascular adaptations. So one big one that affects a lot of other things in the cardiovascular system, predominantly, is cardiac hypertrophy. Cardiac hypertrophy is the walls of the heart becoming thicker and stronger, and it means that a heart can pump blood a lot more forcefully, and the ventricles can have a lot more blood in them to pump. So this leads to a higher stroke volume, which in turn leads to a higher cardiac output. Also, having a stronger working heart will lead to a lower resting heart rate due to there being more blood leaving the heart with each pump due to the ventricles allowing more blood in, and also the heart working a lot more efficiently, so pumping blood a lot more forcefully will mean that there will have to be less blood coming into the heart ultimately. So this leads to a lower resting heart rate. There'll be lower beats per minute going around the heart, and also due to this leads to a larger heart rate range for us to work in. So if we have a lower resting heart rate, so for example, a standard sort of athlete level lower resting heart rate would be 45 to 55 beats per minute, whereas at a normal untrained person will usually be at 60 to 70. So if you're looking at heart rate range, so if you take two people, one's an athlete, trained athlete with a heart rate of say 50, and one's an untrained person and has a heart rate of 60. So they're both 20, so that means that both of their maximum heart rates are going to be 200. So if you look at the range in which you've got, if your heart rate is at 50, it's a slightly larger range to work in. You can make better cardiovascular fitness adaptations and gains. So this means that we have a better level of cardiovascular fitness. Capillarization is where the density of your capillaries become higher, meaning that we can get rid of waste products faster and deliver oxygen quicker. These are mainly adaptations that you get from doing cardiovascular training, no, aerobic training. So this this capillarization means that when we have it means we have a larger density of capillaries around the muscles, which means more oxygen is able to diffuse into the muscles, meaning that we can work for longer. And the carbon dioxide that's being produced by working aerobically will be able to leave the muscles better because there's a large capillary bed to diffuse to. So blood viscosity is also improved by cardiovascular. It is also one of the cardiovascular adaptations that are impacted by aerobic training. So blood viscosity is decreased by exercise as there's more nutrients in the blood. There's also more oxygen in the blood being allowed to be carried due to the higher RBC count. And also blood chemistry files seem to improve. So uh, there's more fibrinogen in the blood. Apologies for pronunciation in that. But there's also been lots of studies on viscosity and its link with aerobic training. So El Sayed in 1998 found that endurance training may result in a better oxygen delivery to muscles due to the dilutional effect of more. It's less clogged up and viscous blood. So the lower the viscosity of blood, the better oxygen uh, delivery to muscles. Lastly, there's an increase in blood volume, and this is also one of the cardiovascular adaptations. So the increase in blood volume is mainly the expansion of uh, plasma in the blood that allows for us to carry more nutrients, and also the expansion of red blood cells, red blood cell volume, and this allows for us to carry more oxygen around the body. These cardiovascular adaptations, so the increase in blood volume also allows for us to carry more. So the higher red blood cell count allows for us to carry away more carbon dioxide from as a waste product from the muscles. So these sort of cardiovascular adaptations are mainly important amongst long distance athletes who need to provide themselves with oxygen and nutrients for longer periods of time. So not many of these adaptations would be caused by anaerobic training that I mentioned before. So weight training. However, you do gain some of these adaptations from anaerobic training. So, for example, as I mentioned before, the sprint training. If you set a training program up with sprint training, there would be a good chance that you would get some sort of cardiac hypertrophy, or there would be some sort of reduced blood viscosity, or even a higher density of capillaries. But the scale at which you're going to get these cardiovascular adaptations through anaerobic training, especially for football, isn't as effective as it would be using uh, aerobic training. So this cardiac hypertrophy and the capillarization is important for football, especially capillarization and the increased blood volume, as more oxygen can then be delivered to the muscles. So it means that we can work for longer, and also there's a lower fatigue level because more of our waste products and our carbon dioxide in the muscles are being carried away more efficiently, and this means that a player can run for longer, he can play for longer, and especially if, for example, in cup competitions, there's there's cases where you can go to, there's certain games where you can go to extra time. So in a game where you go into extra time, you're always going to be very fatigued anyway due to lactic acid buildup or even carbon dioxide buildup. But if there's better cardiovascular adaptation, so better capillarization, so more dense capillary beds, and there's an increase in blood volume, there's a good chance you're going to be a lot less fatigued than other players who haven't got these cardiovascular adaptations.